many of the resources that are out there for women right now are all, have you heard of, the term betrayal trauma? That is a term I do not like because what I have found is it very often keeps women the victim. It kind of makes you stay in almost a victim mentality where you have a villain. He's this terrible person, or he did something that was so bad, which is very comforting and validating to stay in that mindset. However, when you are in that mindset, it's very hard to see your husband or your partner as someone you want to stay with and in a way that you can both move forward. And it keeps you on separate playing fields. It's almost like an I'm better than he is. Like, he did this terrible thing to me. It puts you on different levels. And it's very hard to move forward when you are in that mindset.
Okay, we're recording episode 124, intro with Jolene Winn. Guys, what is going on? Welcome back this week to another amazing, very exciting, but gentlemen, this week, very, very important conversation on the Superhuman Life. Before jumping into that, guys, I'll just remind you how incredibly grateful and thankful I am to have you here with me. I am your host of the Superhuman Life, Frank Rich, guys, and this is the only podcast in the world that is dedicated to helping men become better men by quitting porn and rebuilding their lives. And this week, guys, we have a conversation that we should have had 123 episodes ago, right? How can I have a mission to help men overcome porn? How can I have a mission to help men become the greatest version of themselves by tackling their own porn addiction if we're not speaking to the women in their lives as well? So guys, I'm so excited to have today's guest with me on the show. Guys, I have the porn addict's wife, Miss Jolene Winn of Jolene Winn Coaching. Jolene is a life coach to porn addicts' wives, and she helps Christian women overcome their husband's porn addiction, even if he doesn't. And why I thought that this was a necessary conversation, knowing that 98% of our audience is men. We need to know what's going on in our lives, right? We need to know, how are they viewing our addiction? What impact is this having on their lives? What impact is this having on their emotional state? What impact is having on the way that they view themselves? And in today's conversation, Jolene and I unpack and discuss all of that. We talk about what are some of the reoccurring issues that women are constantly bringing here, guys, that we should know about. We talk about why women in wives shouldn't play the role as an accountability partner. But most importantly, we talk about how a woman should look at the opportunity, or look at her husband's porn addiction as an opportunity for her to once and finally step into her greatest version of herself. And so much more. Jolene and I had an amazing conversation, disagreed about a couple things, agreed on a lot, and probably will be bringing some things in the future to you guys. So guys, like I said, this is a conversation that I'm disappointed I haven't had sooner, but I believe it happened at the right time. So incredibly excited to be sharing this week's podcast episode with you, a conversation with the porn addict's wife, with Miss Jolene Winn. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you on the other side. Jolene, welcome to the Superhuman Life podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I am really excited about this too. I don't even remember where I stumbled across your information, but instantly, like, I saw the Instagram page and I'm like, this woman's a guest. Like, it wasn't even a doubt or hesitation. Like, I got to get her onto the show. Obviously, with the work that you're doing with, I believe you have it titled as a life coach for the porn addict's wife. I love that so much, because when people ask me, like, Frank, what do you do? Like, yes, there's an element of porn recovery that's built into the work that we're doing here, but I've landed on this new help statement. It's like, we help men become better men first by quitting porn and then rebuilding their life. And I'm assuming that's probably not the similar thing that you're doing, but I love that it's a life coach for the porn addict's wife. So I think where I wanted to start here today, Jolene, is if you'd be open to it, talking a little bit about your own story. I'm going to assume that obviously this work that you're doing is rooted in a personal story. So as much as you're willing to share that. And then in addition to that, knowing that there's millions of men that have, or millions of women that have gone through what you're going to share with us, curious as to why you decided to become the porn addict's coach, the porn addict's wife's coach. So share with us, your story as much as you're willing to. Obviously, the dynamics of your own relationship, and then what led you to deciding that this is where you wanted to take your life's work.
I love that. Absolutely. I am an open book. I love to share my story. So thank you so much for having me on. My name is Jolene, and I am a life coach, like you said, for the porn addict's wife because that was me. When my husband and I had been married about 6 years, he came to me one Sunday and he was like, "Hey, Jolie, I just need to talk to you for a sec." And I was like, "Sure." So we had, I think I was either pregnant with my third or we already had 3 kids at the time. And he said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I am addicted to porn and I'm taking care of it. I don't need help and I don't want to talk about it." And I had no idea. So, a lot of women that I've talked to since then, when they find out about their husband's addiction or porn use, or if he tells them, all of a sudden it makes sense. They're like, "Oh, there's all these signs that make so much sense. It answers these questions." I had no idea. So, either I'm super gullible or naive, or he hit it really well, or both. But I had no idea. And he continued to struggle with relapses over the next couple of years. And as I worked through that, all of the emotions and thoughts that came with that, struggling with being intimate with him and trusting him, and everything that came up that I wasn't expecting, as I started to work through that and really understand how much I could change my response and my reaction, the more I came to realize that it's not something everybody knows how to do, right? The more that I realized, okay, I can work on myself and I can't control him, and here's what I can do, and I can work through my thoughts and my feelings, and I can heal from this independently of him. I realized that I needed to go help other women do that, because most women in our society, we talk a lot about the addict. Now, whether you call it an addiction or a compulsive behavior or whatever you call it, or a habit, when you're talking about pornography and especially with addiction, our society says, "Oh, well, the addict is the one that needs to get help," right? Because they're obviously the one with the, quote unquote problem. And that's what I saw. There were all of these resources for my husband, but there weren't a lot of resources for the spouse, for the wife, for the partner. And so I said, "All right, well, if there's not one, then I need to go be that person." And so that's when I decided to go get certified as a life coach and do all the training so that I could go help.
Yeah, what year, what time frame are we kind of talking about here? Like when he first brought this to you?
Okay, that's a great question. I always forget how long I've been married. Okay, so I think I've been married about 13 years now. So I've been coaching for 3 now. I've been coaching for 3 years now.
Okay.
So
And
there was about
when did he come to you for the first time and say, "Jolene, babe, I'm struggling with this," like that whole thing, like, "I don't need help. I'm working through it on my own." What year was that conversation?
that was we'd been married about 5, 6 years. So that was 6 or 7 years ago?
Okay, okay, so we're talking mid 20 teens ish, so 15,
Sure.
16, 15, 16 ish year. And
Yes.
I'm curious at the time, like I know he said that he didn't need the help, he was working through it, and that you weren't even aware. It wasn't like him admitting this to you confirmed something that you already thought was there. But I'm curious how you process it in the moment. And I'm also curious as to where was he going to get help? Because for me, if I think back in 2015, obviously I was at a completely different point. I didn't find my own freedom until 2019. I didn't actually even start looking at the conversation until 2018. And I know for a fact that a for one, because I wasn't around talking about it in 2015. I put 500 videos in the last two years just on YouTube. So I've seen a rise in the acceptance of the conversation. But if I think back to 2015, I don't think that was the case. I don't think that it was something that a lot of men were talking about. I think that it was still kind of, swept under the rug, a lot of people. And still back then, like a lot of people didn't actually accept it even as an addiction, which still is something that we're fighting against. So how did you process it in the moment? Did you think like, what is a porn addiction? Is it even a real thing? Did you immediately go to, this is something sexual that he's caught up in? Did you look at it as another addiction? Yeah, how did you process that initially when he first came to you?
That's a great question. So for me, I'll answer the other half first. But when he said that he was working on it himself, he wasn't actually doing anything. So he wasn't seeing a therapist or going to a group or anything like that. He was trying to kind of willpower himself over it. So that's what he said when he was like, "Oh, I'm working on it." That's what he meant. Um, Eventually he did go to a therapist, but he actually went for depression, not for pornography. So that was what he decided to do, and that was a little bit later. When he told me, I kind of had two responses. The first thing was that I understood it intellectually. When he said, "Okay, I have a pornography addiction," I thought, "Okay, I get that." Because having lived in the world, I was first exposed to pornography in middle school. I think kids were passing it around, and that's when I first saw it. So I understood how appealing it could be. I understood intellectually. I was like, okay, I get the physical response that comes with this. I get the desire to keep searching for it. I understood it intellectually. So part of me thought, okay, I get it. And we can totally handle this. This did not seem that was my mindset. My mindset was like, okay, we've got this. The word addiction, I use the word addiction because that's the word he used when he told me. And I didn't fixate on that. That wasn't something that really threw me. I didn't question whether it was technically an addiction or not. I just took it for face value and said, okay, no problem. Like, then what are we going to do about it? I went into like, you have fight or flight. I wanted to fight. I was like, okay, what's our plan of action? What are we going to do? And so that was a little frustrating for me because, again, at the time I thought the solution would be for him to go do all the things. I was like, okay, you need to go see a therapist, join all the programs. Let's look up stuff for you to do, and he didn't want to do any of those. And I had a very limited knowledge, probably zero, of what to do or what was even out there as a resource. Like you said, it was not talked about as much as it is now. And my instinct was for him to get help, so I didn't do anything. He was kind of willpowering himself through it, but I still thought, like, okay, this is something we can handle. And that's what I thought. That was half of my thought. And then half of my thought was, there must be something wrong with me, right? Because I did see pornography is sexual, right? Even though it's not a addiction is not about sex, right? But pornography images themselves are sexual in nature. And so my immediate frame of thought was like, I must not be sexy enough as a wife. Our sex life must be not enough. Like, I should lose weight or do my hair different or whatever it is. Thought there must be something wrong with me, that if I could just be what I thought he wanted, then it would somehow fix it.
Yeah, wow. There's no, 100%. There's so much for us to unpack there. I definitely want to get to that piece. So if I get off track, Jolene, I'm putting it on you to remind me to circle back there because I think that is something that we need to address. But I'm curious where you stand now because we've mentioned it here a couple times. Like, in your eyes, is it an addiction? Is it a compulsive behavior? How do you kind of define it? And I don't think it's really super important for the context of the conversation. I'm more curious from my own understanding of where do you stand now? Like, do you see it as a clinical addiction, or do you look at it more behavioral, so forth and so forth? What is the language that you use when you talk about?
I typically use the word addiction. Like, that's what I call myself, the porn addict's wife. Um, I I have seen, absolutely, I think it can be an addiction. I don't think every man that looks at porn is addicted to it. So I just use the word addiction. Typically, I don't split hairs over it because my clients, when they come to me, these women, their husbands will call it whatever it is. And I've worked with a lot of clients and some men that, that even that sometimes using a certain word will kind of make it more powerful than it is. So for some men, I feel like it's not helpful for them to call it an addiction because then they define themselves that way. Like, then they see themselves as an addict that will never be able to get over it, right? Once an addict, always an addict. And if they have that mindset, then they're never going to be able to have the hope that enables them to work on it and conquer it. So for me, if it's fine for you to call it an addiction, great. I don't care. If you call it a compulsive behavior, that's also fine. Either way, it's something, if you don't want it in your life, we're going to have to face and work on. So for me, I think some men absolutely are addicted. My husband considers himself addicted. He was, and and so that I just typically use with whatever my clients come to me with. Does
Yeah,
that make sense? Does that answer your
100%. That's great. I mean, I fall into the camp of it's an addiction. I've been
Yeah.
fortunate to have some of the most brilliant people in the world that work on this and study this at a clinical level here on the show. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had Dr. Anna Lemke, who's the Stanford medical director of addiction at Stanford University, and she spent the last 30 years studying porn, sex addiction, and wrote the book Dopamine Nation. And the definition clinically of addiction is it's a repeated behavior that has a negative effects that the person will continue to do. And I'm kind of butchering that, but I agree. No, does every person that look at porn become an addict? No, just like every person that consumes alcohol doesn't become an alcoholic. Every person that does drugs doesn't become a drug addict. But the people that I work with, the people that I help, are addicted. And it doesn't mean that they're bad. And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that a lot of people look at as once an addict, always an addict. I don't see addiction that way. And that's why our entire curriculum and course is centered around taking the man through an identity change. And I believe that the only way to overcome your addiction is to become the man that is no longer addicted to porn. And that's the identity change that needs to take place. And it's got to start with a belief system in and of yourself first. But back to you, because you talked about, A, for one, like you said, you knew it was something that you were going to able to get through, and you believe that you guys were going to be able to get this, but also simultaneously you questioned yourself. What role did I play in this? Was I not
Yeah.
sexy enough? Was I not attractive enough? Was I not beautiful enough? And I know, because I've spoken with enough women, that is instantly where 99% of the women
Yes.
go. So
Yes.
I have my own opinions on this. I probably am speaking out of line in some ways, but I help men, and that's what I'm here to do. That is my mission. So when women come to me and they say, they'll talk about they're cheating, he's cheating on me with these videos, and they begin to look at it like that. And I said, okay, first, how do you define addiction? And that's where I always go to is, do you define this type of addiction in the same way that you define drugs, alcohol, gambling, sports addiction, whatever it is? And then my next question is, if your husband is caught up in sex, drugs, not sex, but drugs, alcohol, gaming, whatever it is, does that mean that he's running to those things because he doesn't find you attractive? So that's where I go, is I try to reframe how the woman looks at it. But I'm curious for you, how were you able to process that in the moment in your own life? And then where does that conversation begin when the women come to you and say, my husband is caught up in porn, and it's because he doesn't find me attractive enough?
I love this. Okay. So it took me a couple years to even recognize that I had that thought. So my conscious response to my husband's addiction was, okay, we've got this. We can totally handle it. Like, what's our plan of action? My subconscious reaction, which I was not aware of for several years, was, I'm not enough. And it took a lot of internal work. It took a lot of working on my own mindset, becoming aware of my thoughts and emotions in order to even uncover that. So I get this a lot. Every single client that I have comes to me and has that same response, that same belief that they're not enough, that they must be doing something wrong in order for him to do that. And also, you mentioned the cheating part, which is so common. We should come back to that later. But they do have this belief that there must be something they could do. And this is interesting because my husband didn't start watching porn until after we were married, and we were both virgins when we got married. So he started his pornography addiction after I was in his life, after we had started having a sexual relationship. And so my brain had all kinds of evidence, right? Of, this has to be about me. I must be terrible in bed. And even though I knew intellectually that wasn't it, because addiction, right? Like you said, by definition, it's and not that it doesn't matter what the substance is, but you could substitute that pornography with drugs or alcohol, and it's the same pattern, right? The reason that women take pornography and they make it about themselves is because it is sexual, right? So as I was saying before, like pornography, those images, the videos, they're sexual in nature. And women are when they are thinking about their sexual relationship with their husband or their partner, they think that the pornography is somehow substituting for that. Does that make sense? And so they're thinking that there must be something, there's some deficiency in how they're showing up. There's something wrong with them because what we learn in society as women is that it's our job to fulfill our partner, our husband's sexual desires. And if we don't, that's not on him, that's on us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, this is all great, and this is why I wanted to have you here because, like, I'm gonna challenge some of these things, and I hope you're okay with that. I push back to Dr. Anna Lemke as well. I guess for me, because I've worked with enough men that are virgins that are caught up in a porn addiction that I don't see the act sexual at all by nature. I know the images are portraying sexuality. I know the images are portraying the act of sex, but I have a hard time um, agreeing with somebody saying that a man that has never had sex has a sex addiction, and his sex addiction is with porn. So,
Hmm.
so I'm curious there. I'm not really going to be able to articulate this into more of a question for you. So maybe it can kind of just be an open discussion here.
No, for
Um,
sure. I agree
so
with you. Like one thing I tell my clients is that pornography addiction is the symptom, right? There's something that is underlying that is like that's just simply the avenue that they've chosen to avoid whatever it is that they're feeling, right? To um avoid being bored or stress, right? Like that's why in times of stress a lot of men struggle even more with porn than they did before, right? Or in more stressful times of their life they act out more on that is not because they have an increase in sexual desire and that's how they find it fulfilling. That's just what they think it is, but there's something underneath that they haven't been able to really figure out internally, and this is simply the avenue that they've chosen to do it. Like you said, it could be drugs. They could have just as easily turned to alcohol or to gambling or to overworking, right? And women, we do this too when we don't want to feel something, when there's some kind of internal imbalance, then we usually turn to food or to online shopping or to scrolling social media. So we all have different avenues that we've chosen. Men, like pornography, first of all, is free and it's very easily accessible. And it has this like physical feel good at the end. So it's very appealing. And I totally understand it. And that's what I help my clients with a lot is trying to get them to see how it's, even though pornography, the images are sexual, pornography addiction is not about sex. It's not about a lack in the sexual relationship. It's not about a lack on the wife's part. It's just simply the outlet of choice.
yeah, I'm curious if you ever speak with women that, or even men in general, that the porn addiction isn't having a huge impact on the intimacy.
For sure. Absolutely. 100%. See, and that's something that even I was super surprised with when my husband told me because we had a great sex life. And so even though so that's another reason why I didn't see it coming. There are several when I see a sexual relationship that is affected, it's not typically because of pornography use or masturbation, but because of the wife's insecurity or the husband's embarrassment, right? Those are the things that affect the sexual relationship more than him watching porn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with you, I know you said it kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't something that you were expecting with your clients, with the women that you're speaking with. I'm gonna assume that that's probably not the case. Like, are most women when they come to you and the husband has admitted for the first time, it's like I've known about this for 10 years. Yeah, so just kind of are most women aware of it and they're not addressing it with the husband, or are most women kind of in the closet like you were?
I would say, I don't know, I don't have maybe half and half. A lot of them know about it. Some of them knew about it before they got married. Some of them they said, "Well, my husband has been, told me that he was watching porn when he was younger. I didn't realize it was still a problem, or I didn't think it was going to affect us." Some women found out themselves, discovered it, caught him is what they usually say. and some of them their husband then confessed. So it's been all over the place. Most of my clients though, like my husband not watching it until after we were married is very rare. Most men s- um most husbands of all of my clients started in preteen years watching porn.
Yeah, and I think that's the case with most men. Average age of first exposure is somewhere between 10 and a half and 11 years old right now, and it's just drastically getting lower and lower and lower with obviously the rise of phones, devices, and just the accessibility of it all. And that's usually the case with us as well, as we don't see men that are just finding it in their 20s or 30s. It's like no, it's been around for a super long time, and that was my story as well. First exposure was 6. Internet, came around at 15. Cell phone, smartphones came around 21, 22 years old with the original Blackberry device, and that became a 20-year struggle with this. Um, just curious, like maybe not even specifically with your clients, just like in kind of in your social circles, like what's the conversation around you with other women, whether they're married women that aren't your clients or women that are dating, like how should they approach the conversation? If a woman is dating a man, or if a woman is married, like not that they need to be hyper aware, but hey, let's just get the conversation on the table, right? Let's talk about the pink elephant in the room. How do you kind of go about that? Do you speak with people about, yeah, when you're dating somebody, try to figure this stuff out? Like, yeah, what kind of role does the woman play in even bringing the conversation to the table?
It's a great question. I think the thing that normally comes up, I have had several clients that were thinking about getting married, and so they came and worked with me and then decided to get married. Um, when I talk to people about this, the way that I always say is that it's absolutely okay to bring it up and to just ask, instead of asking like, "Hey, have you ever looked at porn?" Just say, "Hey, when was the last time you've seen it?" Because I mean, literally, you could go through my Instagram and go into the Reels option and just start scrolling. It's going to pop up, right? It just isn't even something you have to search out these days. It gets sent to you directly. Like it's thrown in your face all day long. So, just being open about this kind of a conversation and recognizing that there is no shame in your response to it, right? Pornography is created on purpose to create a physical response. And I think there's a lot of shame that women and men have, even if they get exposed to it accidentally or unintentionally, that creates a desire for us to not talk about it. We're like, well, I don't want to talk about it because that was really embarrassing, or I shouldn't have. I feel bad that my body responded that way, but that's actually very normal. It's very healthy. Your body actually responded the way it's actually supposed to, right? And that doesn't mean that you're a terrible person, right? When we are too afraid to have candid conversations, then the silence, the secret becomes bigger than the problem. And that's what I see so often is that we think there's so much shame attached to it on both sides that we are so intent on keeping the secret and not talking about it because we don't want to bring it up, because we don't want to have hard conversations, that then the secret becomes bigger than the problem. Does that make sense?
No, I love that so much. Big fan of speaking truth. And plenty of research here supporting it. The stories that we tell creates the realities in our lives. And when we openly admit to things, we begin to create neural pathways in our brain and in our mind that this is the story of our lives. And when we tell lies, we create neural pathways. And a telling of a lie doesn't need to be this structured, like entire story I'm trying to come with. Telling of a lie is an admittance, an omnitness of the truth. And many times when we don't share just a full radical honesty, we may not be lying, but we're not telling the full truth. So I'm 100% in line with everything you're sharing here, and how powerful that is, both in a man's transformation, but obviously in the inner dynamics of a relationship. So I'm curious with you if we can maybe talk a little bit about like the journey that you take women through. So what is it that they're coming to you for? What is your goal, desired outcome with them through the course of whether it's a course or coaching program, time frame? Like, what are you actually looking to achieve with these women? Because for me, we're very clear. Like, we help the men become better men by quitting porn, rebuilding a life, and stepping into life that they were created to live. So there's an element of faith rooted in it. There's an element of stepping into a bigger calling and purpose for your life. Our logo is a phoenix inside of a lion's head. So we take them through a death and resurrection, killing off of their old self, and then releasing them back out into the wild or into the world as a man that is ready to conquer and take claim in his life. So for you, what does that journey process look like with the wives?
I love this. Okay, so my whole goal with the women is to help them learn that they can move forward independent of what their husband is doing. So much of the resources, so many of the resources that are out there for women right now are all, have you heard of, the term betrayal trauma? That is a term I do not like because what I have found is it very often keeps women the victim. It kind of makes you stay in almost a victim mentality where you have a villain. He's this terrible person, or he did something that was so bad, which is very comforting and validating to stay in that mindset. However, when you are in that mindset, it's very hard to see your husband or your partner as someone you want to stay with and in a way that you can both move forward. And it keeps you on separate playing fields. It's almost like an I'm better than he is. Like, he did this terrible thing to me. It puts you on different levels. And it's very hard to move forward when you are in that mindset because you always have to have a villain. If you're the victim, there's always going to be a villain. And if he's the villain, that's not someone it's going to be a little bit harder to have a great relationship with that frame of mind. So when I coach women, my coaching program is designed to help them stop seeing themselves as the victim. You have to be willing to get rid of that story. You have to be willing to say, you know what? I can't control him. I'm not the victim. I don't have to stay this way. I can move forward. I can heal and I can move forward even if he doesn't. Most women think that the ability for them to move forward is attached to his recovery, right? They think that I'm feeling miserable and like crap and I don't trust him and none of this is going to get fixed unless he gets sober, right? But the problem with that is that it doesn't work like that, right? Because all his addiction did was bring up your own stuff. It didn't create it. My husband's pornography addiction didn't create my physical insecurities. I've had those since I was 11. It just brought them to the surface. And so that's my work, to look at those and to work through those so that I can move forward and stop using his addiction as an excuse to keep them with me. Does that make sense? You're smiling. Does that make sense?
Jolene, I love you so much. Are you familiar with Donald Miller, building a story brand? I don't know how much you put
No,
into.
no,
Okay,
I'm not.
so Donald Miller, he wrote Building a Story Brand. His company is Story Brand. He wrote Business Made Simple, Marketing Made Simple. He's got another book called The Hero Something. But he's a business coach consultant. But he coaches business through the lens of storytelling, and his work is centered around like the anatomy of a story, and every story holds four characters. You have a victim, villain, hero, and guide. And as you're talking about this, I'm like, God, I love what she's doing because you're speaking at the narrative level where you're using these terms like you're a victim and villain, but then you're taking the woman and saying, no, none of this is going to lead you. Being either the victim is not going to lead you to success in your life. You need to become the hero of your own story, of your own journey. And I got some pushback like a year ago when I told a woman, I said, your husband's porn addiction may be the greatest opportunity in your life for you to expose yourself to your own weaknesses, your own shortcomings, do the own work on yourself while he's working on himself. Then you guys come back together and you create this unity. You create this family with a deeper, much bigger mission and calling. I love that is where you're taking all of this. Is you're like, hey, you know what? What happened has happened. Like, if we focus on the problem, it's going to just continue to manifest and create bigger problems. Look at it as an opportunity to identify weaknesses in your own self. Like, we all have them. Every single one of us has things that we need to improve upon. So why not look at this as an opportunity to work on those things while your husband is obviously working on the biggest problem in his life? And I don't know, and I don't know why I wasn't able to find anybody else that like agreed with that because I was getting pushback from both men and women saying, no, Frank, that's not the case. You have to heal the heart. You have to look at it through emotions. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because if you fix yourself, your heart will be healed in the process. If you begin to grow and work on areas where you're short, work on areas where you're weak, work on growing and evolving and becoming a better version of you, your
Yes.
heart will heal itself in that process because you cannot become complete and whole. You cannot become the person God created you to be with a broken heart. So I love all of that.
100%. 100%. I love that you said that because that is something that, yes, is difficult to hear. A lot of women, because here's what happens is a lot of women think that if you say, hey, let's work on you, then their brain goes, well, then you're telling me that there's something wrong with me that I'm responding this way. And that's not the case. It's not that you're, you know, made incorrectly. And there's something we have to fix about you. But the opportunity here is, okay, yeah, that happened. Your husband is struggling with porn. So what? And I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, what are you going to do about it? We can't change him. Our brain always wants to focus on other people. It always wants to focus on the things outside of us and change those. It thinks that, well, once we change something outside of us, that will solve our internal struggles, right? If I lose weight, then I'll feel better about myself. If I make more money, then I'll feel more successful. If my husband stops watching porn, then I'll feel more confident. And it's totally backwards. We're doing it the wrong way. We're trying to work from the outside in, and we have to work from the inside out. The truth is that all of these internal struggles, all the insecurity, the distrust, all of it could have come up whether or not your husband was addicted to porn. It could have come up from the porn addiction, or maybe it would have come up if he lost his job, or maybe it would have come up if your kid, heaven forbid, started hurting themselves. Whatever it is, all it is just your own internal stuff that you've been trying to suppress for your entire life, all of a sudden coming to the surface. And now we get to look at it. And this is the best news ever, which is what I always say, because now we get to look at it on purpose and decide if we're going to use it for our advantage, if we're going to use it to look at it and become the next version of ourselves, right? Like you said, the version that God wants us to be. I mean, we're here on this life to progress, to use this human experience that we have and the relationships that we're in to move forward. But that's our choice. We can either use the things that we experience to stay exactly where we are, or we can use them to move forward. And that's the choice that you have. So which do you choose? It's very tempting to stay where we are because where we are is comfortable. Our comfort zone is what keeps us stuck because we don't want to step into discomfort on purpose. That's very hard to do. So we just want to stay exactly where we are, even if where we are isn't where we want to be, because it's what we know. It's what we're comfortable with. I'm comfortable not trusting my husband. I'm comfortable thinking of him as the villain. It's more uncomfortable to possibly let go of that narrative, to let go of that story, because if I don't have a villain, I can't blame him for how I'm feeling. I have to take responsibility for it in order to move forward. And that's
Yeah.
harder to do.
No, I love that. Love that so much. And it's the conversation that I have weekly, right? Oh, I'm struggling, but I'll quit when I get a wife. I'll quit when I become successful. I'll quit when I graduate school. And the answer is no, you won't. Because the person that's going to arrive at that future destination is the same person that you are right now. And that's why everything that I talk about, everything that we do is centered around that identity change. This is so good. I'm really curious with your take on like the women being, the wife or even girlfriend here. We can kind of maybe open it up to just relationships
Yeah, for sure.
in general, being like the accountability partner, right? Or
No,
the one
I
that
disagree with it 100%.
access is covenant eyes. I do as well. I'm curious as to why you
Okay.
feel that
I
way.
don't agree with it simply because most women are not in an emotionally stable place to be that support that the man needs. They don't, even if they say they do, what they really want when they say they want to be the accountability partner, what they really want is someone to,
Control.
to
They want
say,
control.
they want control. They want to believe him, and they think that him coming to them and talking to them every time is what's going to make them trust him. That's what's going to make me trust you is if you come and tell me every time. That's what's going to make me feel better. But it's all a false sense of control, and most women are not emotionally I don't know if the stable is the right word, but healthy, or have the tools to handle what comes up for them when their boyfriend, spouse, whoever it is, comes and says, hey, I slipped up today, or hey, I was, even if they didn't slip up, even if they didn't watch it, even if he said, hey, I was triggered, that brings up a whole slew of thoughts and emotions in the woman that she probably isn't able to really deal with in a healthy way. And she might be able to shove it down and pretend like it's great for a little while, but it's going to come back later.
No, I love that. Love that. And then maybe just kind of like an extension of that. Like the mother that's the mother here. I'm already giving the question away. Like the woman that wants to step into almost like a motherly type of role. And I think it's almost kind of like right in line with this as well. It's like I need to help him. I need to save him. I need to fix him. Yeah. What's that conversation like with women?
It's very tempting for women to go into that mindset of being the fixer. Again, the problem with that is when you are only looking at the man that you're having this relationship with as someone who needs to be fixed, it's a very difficult, sustainable relationship in the way that you want it to be. You do go into more of a mothering role, like you said, rather than a partner, right? And you see him as a problem, which is not a super, even if you don't think that consciously, it frames the way you approach every single conversation. It changes the energy in a room when you're talking to them. It's not, hey, are you like, is there something I can do for you? It's like, hey, you know, so have you struggled with anything recently? Like you come into it with a very different energy that changes the nature of your relationship into something that isn't what you want.
Yeah. So how do you coach women then, or do you subscribe like a weekly cadence of conversation? So woman comes to you, she says, Jolene, my husband's addicted to porn. Let's say, you know what? Here's a perfect example. Woman comes to you, said, hey, you know what? I heard your episode with Frank on the Superhuman Life. My husband is in Frank's coaching program. So they're going through a 4 month, super intensive weekly coaching groups. He's got his accountability. He's got his course materials. Frank's getting him ripped and he's putting muscle on. He's transforming his mind. So the guy's taken care of. The woman comes to you and starts working with you. What's the cadence of conversation like between the two of them? Do they update each other on their progress? Does the man like leave for 4 months and then they returns back while the woman's gone? Like, yeah. So kind of how does the recovery on the male side and what you're doing with women work together?
That's a great question. Um, the way that I always talk to my ladies about it is I tell them that they are more than welcome to talk to their husband about what they're doing, but you have to know why you're telling them because a lot of women will start working on themselves and want to use it almost as a manipulation to show him how well they're doing and maybe he should get his act together or um see who's doing better than the other person, right? So when I see women that want to share, that's great. I'm like, share with no strings attached. You can have that conversation with your spouse and say, you know what, I'm going to work on myself, and I think they should. um but it is often very tempting for women to want to have a conversation and say, hey, I learned this amazing thing, in the kind of subconscious hope that it will shift something in his mind and be the catalyst to him changing into the man they always knew he could be. So I always caution against that.
No, I love that. I love that. And as you're sharing that, it's like I got knocked upside the head as like a reminder of mistakes that I've made. Like I'm
Mm.
not perfect in my journey. I'm not perfect in anything that I'm doing. I'll just kind of share with you, So I'm not married. I'm single now. I was in a very uh long-term relationship, like very we were deep in, and that was kind of the genesis for me even finding my own freedom, because we were in discussion of kind of moving forward. And I knew then, like, okay, because I was getting exposed to this, I'd been saved in 2018. So my entire life had changed, my worldviews and everything. And I knew for her, I knew back then, like if we were going to pursue this moving forward, like I needed to get clean. Like I needed to like tell the truth. Like she needed to know what was actually going on, and I needed to work through this. But I think I got caught up in exactly what you said there. It's like the first year for me transformed my life, right? Like literally 3 months after it, I began to see the world completely different. And that put me in the position where I said, I need to tell the world about this. My life has changed. Let me tell the world. And that obviously led us to the podcast. But I think I was doing this and I wasn't focused on home. I was focused on who I was becoming, but I wasn't focused on who I was showing up in the relationship. And the way that I saw it is like, no, Steph, you need to see, like, look at how I'm changing the world now through my own recovery. Look at all the good that I'm doing. And I wasn't paying attention to her. I wasn't paying attention to home first. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's like sometimes we want to talk about what we're doing as a way of like, look at me, look at all the good, when in reality, we need to bring it back down and say, this is who I'm becoming for us together to bring us closer to this bigger mission and vision that we have for our life. So I really, really love that.
The way that I talk about it with my ladies, one thing we really work on is helping them to let go. My whole goal with these women is to help them get to a place where they are confident emotionally that they can handle anything, even if it never changes. That they are willing, that they are able to let go of the, not the desire for him to recover, because I think that that's a great desire, a great hope that, right, that he could, but letting go of the need for him to change. And that's really when you get to a place emotionally where you let go of the need for him to change, when you can accept him 100% as he is, then that is when you're able to come to these conversations with him with so much more openness, so much more compassion, and it creates a completely different experience and relationship, even if he never gets better. And I don't even use the word gets better, but even if he never stops watching porn, you can have a great relationship and you can be exactly where you want to be emotionally because you are confident that you have the tools to do so and you've become the person that you want to be. So you know you can handle anything.
Yeah, I love that. Love that so much. I would be doing a discredit if I didn't ask this next question. Obviously, our audience is men. You work with women. What is the reoccurring, whether it's issue, complaint, thing that women are bringing to you that every time you hear it, you're like, how do, how do men not know this? Like, so what is it? What is it that's constantly being brought to you by your either clients, the women that you talk with, that the men today need to hear?
Okay. Well, first, I would say the number one thing that comes to my mind is, gentlemen, if you are struggling with pornography and you haven't told your spouse, partner, girlfriend, whoever it is yet, go tell them. It is much harder for women to, they would rather you tell them. But to them, the dishonesty is worse than the pornography.
Can we coach them through that process? I'd love to get your, your professional take on this as a woman. Um, because I would obviously have a way that I would believe it would be best done best, if that's a proper way to say that. But be curious with you. Like, so yeah, as like let's use this literally as like a coaching moment right now for the audience. Like, if you know and you want to get it to her, lead us through
Mhm.
that process.
Okay. I've never been asked this before. This is great. I'm just thinking on the fly. So, one thing that I would say could help sometimes is if you feel comfortable to do so, if you know she'll need like a best friend, right? Whether that person is there for the conversation, I don't think has to be there. But if you want to tell her mom or her dad or her best friend ahead of time and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, I'm going to talk to her about it, but I know she's going to need someone. And it's not going to be, she's not going to want to talk to me. And so just having someone there, and that you know your girl best, right? So maybe she doesn't want to talk to anybody, but I think she would. And then my second piece of advice is to be okay with her having a lot of different emotions, because the way she's going to react, I can't predict. She might get angry. She might burst into tears. She might yell at you. It doesn't mean anything. A lot of gentlemen are going to come. It's tempting to get very defensive. And I want to caution against getting super defensive, even if she comes at you offensively, even if she yells at you, even if she cries, just sit back and allow her to get it out. The way that she responds initially is not necessarily a true indication of how it's going to continue. So, but when we come into a conversation defensive, and I teach my ladies this too, when we come in defensive, the other person automatically goes on offense, and then we're on opposing sides, which means we can't get anywhere. So remembering that you're on the same team is a great way to start, and just relax against your natural inclination to defend yourself. It's okay. It's going to be a hard conversation, and that's all right. But you guys are on the same side. You're on the same team. And then the other thing that I would say is make sure encourage her to get a professional help. I always say that you should be talking to 3 people about like your husband's addiction. It should be your husband. So gentlemen, she's going to want to talk to you about it. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to bring up a lot of emotion. That's why you work with Frank so that you can join his program and he can help you work through this, okay? So 3 people, you should be talking to each other. She should have one person that she can just like vent to, best friend, whoever, and then she needs a professional. I would love to be that person if she wants to work with me, but she needs one person on her own. If you guys want to do couples counseling, that's great. She needs one person that's just for her. So that's what I would say is encourage her to reach out for help.
I love that. Love that. And we advise three people as well. You need an ally. You need an ally. You need somebody that's walking the same walk that you're on right now. We provide that within our support groups. You need a coach or mentor, so somebody that's going to lay kind of out the plan at which you'll follow. And then you need an expert. And sometimes the coach, mentor, and expert can be the same individual. I would see somebody like myself that would maybe play that role, but oftentimes if the person isn't, trained professionally or doesn't have the experience, they can maybe provide the framework so they can be a mentor. Maybe somebody's overcome it in themselves, but they don't really have a
Yes,
clinical background.
for
So
sure.
in that role, you maybe want like a therapist, pastor, or somebody else in your corner. I'm curious for you, like how you kind of view the role that the church is playing in this, because I see underneath your main line here that you teach Christian women how to overcome them, and you're very specific in doing that. You obviously haven't openly discussed it here, but I'm assuming the fact that you and your husband were virgins when you met, that the faith has been a big part of your life your entire life. So for you, when you look at the church, and when I speak church, I'm talking like the big kind of, not a specific individual location, but the church in and of itself, I don't feel is addressing the men's problem correctly. When you look at statistics, the Barna research in 2019 showed that 56% of pastors and 64% of youth pastors admit to struggling with it. And only 7% of churches have a program or course helping men. This is why a big part of what we're doing here locally, is we've partnered with Grace Family Church that has 7 locations and building on a curriculum and hopefully be able to launch that nationally. So for you, where do you see the church's role in this? Are they doing an effective job? Are they doing a poor job? Not attacking them specifically, but obviously I'm going to assume that you're probably going to lean toward more of the side that they're not doing a great job. That's why you've planted your flag where it is. So yeah, just kind of like where do you see the church's role in this? And how has that obviously played a role in the work that you're doing?
I think that's a great question. Um, I Let me think my thoughts real quick. I think that overall, Christianity church not doing a great job in that I think they're trying, but I think that the church, the leadership of the church, right, the pastors, the preachers, the ones who are trying to lead their flock, right, we're all flawed humans, and these are people who are doing their very best but probably don't have the um training to handle this very well, and that's okay. Their role is spiritual. I like that they stay spiritual. I um My specific branch of Christianity is I'm LDS or Mormon. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Our church actually does have a pornography addiction and all the other types of addictions recovery program, which is great. It's more come out in the last like 5, 8 years that it's become more mainstream. So that was not something that when my husband told me I was even really aware of. Um, but I don't think we're doing a great job at addressing it when it starts. Right now, I feel like the church is behind. I feel like the church is trying to catch up, and now we have all these marriages and adults that are addicted to porn. When in reality, like you said, they're becoming exposed to it preteens, right? The average age of exposure is before 11. So it's something that we should be addressing much sooner. And what I think needs to happen is we need to have youth centered programs on this. We need to have parents really understand what this is, how their kids are getting exposed to it. We need to talk about it, like I was saying, like we have to stop making it a secret. The reality is it's 50% of guys pretty much, right? And increasing numbers of women. right? And that's not going down anytime soon. So now that we know this, we have to stop making it something that we never talk about. We have to start having more of a conversation. And I do love when spiritual leaders stay spiritual, but what I would love for them to do is encourage more action outside of it being a spiritual thing. I think it's very tempting for Christians when they have something like pornography because we believe it's a sin, right? That we shouldn't be doing it. I think it's very tempting to just like, okay, well, I just need to go talk to my pastor and like kind of have like a little confessional moment and we'll work through it spiritually. But there's also a an emotional psychological component to this that needs to be dealt with, right? Which is why you have your program. And I think the church needs to be better at saying, okay, I'm going to help you with the spiritual side of this and we're going to get right with God, but like you also need this other part. And that's what I feel like we're kind of missing.
No, I love that, and 100% agree with that. That's why we've planted the flag as deep in the ground as possible, and it's not going anywhere. And there's obviously an entire faith piece of our curriculum, but that's like a third of it. So there's obviously the spiritual component, there's the physical component, because if you're struggling with an addiction, it means you're struggling with it in the body that you have right now. And if you don't have full control over that, you're never going to get full control of your mind, heart, or even in a behavior. So there's a spiritual component, there's a physical component, and then obviously the big piece for me, looking at it through the lens of neuroscience, as I tend to do most often, there's the brain. Like literally, we have to rewire the brain. We have to create new patterns of thinking. We have to create new patterns of behavior. And can spiritual praying and some of the principles and disciplines in a religious practice help with that? Yes, but it's going to have to go a little bit deeper. I appreciate you. I appreciate you answering that. I know it was obviously something I didn't tell you I was going to bring up, and not always the easiest question, but I really, really do. I'm curious with you. You talked about your family and obviously your kids and stuff like that. How are you guys? This may be off topic from the work, but just with you and your husband, I'm going to assume, I don't know how old your kids are. There will come a point when they know what mom does, if they don't already know. But I'm assuming you guys are getting in front of the conversation now. So, for one, how old are your kids? And how are you guys kind of having those conversations if you're already having them? And what's your plan? I think because that could obviously really help both the men and women that are listening. So, moving outside of the coaching
Mhm.
component more into the family dynamic. How old are your kids, and what's that conversation like with them right now?
We have 5 kids. My oldest is 10 and my youngest is 4. And so I've been coaching, like I said, for 3 years. And so they have known about it since day one. Obviously, we use like child appropriate terms and things like that. But we talk about it a lot. And I think that that's one of my biggest takes is, as I was saying before, is you need to start having this conversation more regularly. One of the reasons that we think that pornography is uncomfortable is because we don't talk about it a lot, right? And so the more you talk about it, the more comfortable it becomes. My kids know what pornography is, they know what to do when they see it. One of the best things, one of the best resources for that is Defend Young Minds. They have a book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, and they have good pictures, bad pictures for older kids, and then for younger kids. So we've had the younger kids ones, and it just sits on our shelf, and we've read it at story time for years, right? And we have the older version now, and just knowing what they're supposed to do when they see it, it and knowing that they will see it means that when they do, they don't feel like they have to hide it. And they ask questions and we're very open and I share what I coach about and that I they know that I coach on this. Now obviously when they get a little older, they'll probably have a better understanding of what this means of what we do. But they know that my husband was addicted. They know that it created a lot of issues, not issues, I don't say issues, but like it I reacted to it. It affected us and our marriage. And that's why I do what I do because I used to stay at home. I didn't work. And so when I decided to become a life coach and go help them, it was a big dynamic shift. I had a 1 year old all the way up to a 7 year old. And so we talked to the kids about it and said, okay, mom's going to work because there are women that need help and she's going to go help them. So I think having that conversation frequently and again, asking your kid, hey, when was the last time you saw it? Rather than, "Hey, have you ever seen it?" Because the truth is, yes, they have
Yeah,
yesterday.
or
Yeah.
or 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 thinking that your kid is gonna be the one, special
That makes
child
it through.
that
Yeah.
makes it through. Oh, because my kid is good and he gets good grades and he loves his
Mm.
teacher and he does his homework, so it's gonna keep him away from pornography. Well, you know what? Frank Rich had straight A's all the way from 1st grade through like 11th
So did
grade,
my husband.
and he watched a lot of pornography in
Yeah.
those 10 years. I love that, and I talk a lot about my personal life here, like I'm single, but I play an active role in my nephew's life. He's 11. He knows that coach. He knows that, he calls me Coach Frank because I coach his little league team. But he knows that Uncle Frank, has a podcast. He knows that he's active in creating content. He doesn't yet really know the context of the content that I create. I wish that he did, because I think at 11 he could understand it. His mom has decided not to yet have that conversation with him, but I know that it'll come here in the next couple of years when he begins to put it together, either just through a search where he finds his uncle's work, and it's going to put me in a very empowering position where I can have a real conversation with a young boy about what he's going to enter into as he gets into middle school and high school. And I look forward to that opportunity. So I appreciate and obviously really um, really see what you guys are doing with the family as the right way. And I wish more parents took that approach. I've talked a lot about the book Good Pictures Bad Pictures. We haven't had
Mhm.
them on the show yet, but we
So
did
good.
have Protect Young Eyes, who is Chris McKenna.
Yes.
So we had Chris on
Yes.
the show,
He's so
which was
good.
just incredibly impactful. Yeah. So I love all this. I love what you're doing. I just want to maybe wrap it up with a couple questions, and then
For sure.
we'll drive it home here. First of all, thank you again, Jolene, for coming
Of
on and just
course.
sharing all of this. I feel like you and I could probably talk for hours.
I know. I was like,
Um,
anytime, man. Let's do it again.
yeah. Um, how have you dealt with this? Will be a personal question, like dealt with judgment. So obviously coming out, launching a business, launching a coaching business to help women. Like it's obviously rooted in your own personal story, and you openly shared some intimate details of your life today. How have you dealt that with judgment, both publicly, like putting your face out there on the internet, but then also privately, like in circles. I'm assuming in the church, what I understand and know about the LDS Church, like it can be. And this is all people, right? All people judge other people. So have you dealt with that publicly, and then dealing with the judgments privately as well?
What's fascinating is I haven't had a lot of judgment. What was fascinating, my husband and I started sharing our story before I decided to become a life coach. And what was fascinating is there was no judgment. It was all thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Me too. We had so many people reach out. The reason one of the things that influenced me to become a life coach was after we started talking about it and sharing it just with close family and friends. I had so many women message me, text me and say, this is us too. This is us too. And I had no idea that it was such a prevalent issue. And that alone just solidified. And I said, okay, I have to go help these women because I didn't even realize there were that many out there. So I haven't had a lot of judgment. Mostly what I get is judgment on Instagram from like a reel I post from people that are like, pornography is great and I think it's awesome and you're such a prude. And I'm like, that's fine. To me, it doesn't bother me. I know that people are going to judge either way. So I would rather have people judge me for my convictions and what I am creating in the world than have them judge me for not doing that because they're going to have thoughts either way. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway there for me, because that was my story too. It was like the minute I had this fear, like I'd shared it with two people right out of the gate, and then like I was like, okay, I need to tell all of my friends now. And like I've been very fortunate to like develop relationships with incredible people. I mean, successful in life, successful materially, but successful just in who they are. So there was a lot of fear for me back then. But the minute I opened it once, and it was like, okay, like I did the same thing. What's for you next? And then the support came. The support came. That was the paradigm shifting moment for me. It was like, I've been worried about this for 20 years. Just go talk about it, and more importantly, tell everybody about it. And maybe a lesson there is if there's a guy out there right now, and you've stuck around this entire conversation today, and you haven't spoken with, whether it's your wife or your best friend or your pastor or your coach or your mentor or anybody, it starts with that first conversation, and it starts with that removing of the shame. You can't be shamed about something that you're openly discussing with other people. So if you're struggling with shame about what you're doing, the only antidote to changing that is to talk about it, because you cannot be ashamed of something you're openly addressing with another individual. So I appreciate you sharing that. What are some of the best resources, both for men and women, and then obviously we'll drive it home here today. So men out there that are struggling, any great resources where you want to direct them to get some help, and then the women that however they ended up here listening to this conversation today, if they're still with us, where can they go? And then obviously plug all your own work. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your coaching? Where can they find out about that? And then we'll bring today's conversation home with our last question, Jolene.
Awesome. I love this. I think that one of my favorite resources is Fight the New Drug. simply for all of the statistics that they bring, and they have such a scientific and objective eye. So it's an easy place for people to start.
And they got
With
some
their
sweet
branding.
threads.
What?
And they got some sweet threads. I see you
I
rocking
know
their
they do. I
shirts,
know.
all the
I
time.
know. I love their clothes. I was like, I wish I was wearing one. I have like 9. Usually I'm wearing one. But I do love their stuff, and I love their mission to educate about the harmful effects of pornography. So again, I think that's a really great place for people to begin. As far as, I mean, I know of tons of different coaches that do what you do. I think try you, man. Like, obviously your podcast listeners, like, if I could give one piece of advice, it's start. Like, today can either be the day that you start or the day that you wish you'd started. So you get to make that decision. And what happens is we get stuck in indecision. Well, I don't know which program to join and I don't know which one is best. You just pick one and you go, and you decide that that one is, you're going to give it all, and you're going to go all in, and it's going to make a difference. And that's how it changes, is you decide to show up 100%. So absolutely go join Frank's program. Obviously your listeners resonate with you, so I don't think it's, you have to plug in any other coaches that I know, because they're listening to you for a reason. So yes, they should sign up, especially if they've gotten as much out of their podcasts, out of your podcast, as they have, which we know they have because they're still listening. Just imagine how much more you could get out of coaching, like out of that one-on-one attention, out of that 100% dedication. Like, if you want your life to change, that's how you do it. For women, there really aren't a lot of resources that I love, which is why I started doing what I do. There's a lot of betrayal trauma resources, but again, those are not my favorite. So what I would suggest is come coach with me. I 100% think I am the best coach for this, not only because I've been through it, but because of the work that I've done with my clients over the last couple of years. I've curated a program that is specifically for this, for these women, and I know exactly how to get them where they want to go. So if you want to work with me, my website is jolenewinn.com, and my podcast is called the Porn Addict's Wife Podcast.
Awesome. And guys, we'll get all that information, guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get all that information, Jolene's site. No, I agree 100%. You know, the coaching program that's going to work for you is the one that you're going to work. And it comes down to that. Am I the only person that's going to help a man find freedom from pornography? No, I've had other coaches. I've had my friends on here, Sathia, Drew, Dr. Trish. So there's incredible resources out there. We speak specific language. I have a clear direction on how I believe a man finds freedom, but it's not easy. And I don't want anybody that's going to come to me and think it's going to be easy. So I appreciate that. We'll get all your information plugged down there as well. I think just based on this conversation and the little bit that I got to know you today, if this is what your coaching is about and this is the work that you're doing with women, I'm in full support of it, and I will do everything I can to drive women your way, if you know, because I do get a lot of women that reach out to me, and we just don't yet have the bandwidth to have anything to offer to the women right now, and I'm not sure it'll ever be a fight that I decide to enter into, and that's not because I don't think it's needed. I just need to be clear on what it is that I'm doing, if I'm going to be able to actually achieve the things that we're trying to do in the world. So maybe one day there is, maybe it doesn't happen, but for the time being, go check out Jolene Winn's coaching. We'll get all that plugged down. So as we bring today's conversation to a close, we have one question that we end every single episode with, Jolene. Obviously, the title of the show is The Superhuman Life. And for me, when I talk about living a superhuman life, it's really it's a belief system. It's a way that I try to show up and operate in the world every single day. And it's coming from the place that I do believe we were all put on this earth for a purpose. There's a calling on each one of our lives, but that's only half of the equation. If all we did was knew we had a purpose, that purpose would never be brought to the world to make the world a better place. We have to be very intentional and aggressive in the work that we do. So I believe living a superhuman life is you're clear on your purpose and you're aggressively and relentlessly attacking that purpose every single day through building your body, through developing your mind, and through, more importantly, reshaping your heart and soul. So for you, Jolene, as we bring today's podcast to a close, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I love that. I think living a superhuman life is all about becoming the very best version of yourself. Just like you were saying, that is an action. Becoming is an action. It's not just thinking it, it's not just wanting it or believing that it's possible. It's doing, it's stepping into the discomfort in every aspect, in the physical, the mental, emotional, spiritual. stepping into who you want to be and doing that on purpose. I think you nailed it. I think that's really what it takes to live a superhuman life, is to live and not just to exist. And living is an action.
Love that so much, guys. Live, don't exist. And you can't live when you're caught up in an addiction. Jolene, thank you so much. Guys, we appreciate you. If you are new here to the Superhuman Life, we appreciate you tuning in with us today. If you got value out of this conversation, you can help the show in one of two ways. First off, if you're getting value, leave a 5-star rating and written review. But today is more important. If there's somebody in your life that needs to hear this conversation, whether it's a spouse down the road, or whether it's the man that hasn't told his spouse yet, whoever this individual is, if there's somebody that you know that needed to hear this message, do us the favor, but do them the blessing by sharing today's conversation with them. But for Jolene Winn, Frank Rich of the Superhuman Life, we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.